So I think the expectation from the beneficial cargo owners, BCOs, the manufacturers, the cargo owners themselves is taking an up tempo. We're seeing an uptick as the e-commerce demand, if you track it back to the customer, the demand from customers, because there are so many options, there's so much online activity that the end user customer and therefore the supplier, the BCOs and the freighters are much higher. So it's becoming exacerbated, it's becoming a lot more intense, the competition is a lot more intense. And I think what we're seeing increasingly right across the board, especially from our side of the business as a global search exponent and a consulting firm, is that we're seeing a demand from customers for talent in particular that can understand end-to-end supply chain. So especially providers who have all of the parts of the supply chain at their disposal. And that comes down to this whole argument of whether you're going to be asset light or asset heavy, whether you're going to own ships or own aircraft or own trucks or railways. And we're seeing some of the big players in the world currently really taking that on big time and making sure they've got that assets so when the cycle does complete, and everything in life is cyclical, including supply chain and logistics, then we're going to make sure that the companies that want to have most of those assets in place will be able to ride out the tough times as well. Well, of course, there's a lot of obvious capabilities, and if I look back to when I was a general manager in air cargo in New Zealand in 1989 for Ansett New Zealand, the physical environment, to be honest, hasn't really changed a lot. But what sits around the air cargo ecosystem and environment is substantially evolved. So what are some of the upsides? Of course, air cargo, air freight, the use of aviation for moving freight, which is about 1% of the world's freight movement, but 30% of the value of the world's freight movement is enormous, because you're not getting held up in ports, you don't have such major capacity blockages. Hence we're seeing the likes of Boeing over here producing a lot more aircraft. A lot of the suppliers are getting whatever aircraft they can. They're converting passenger aircraft into cargo aircraft so they can get more uplift. So the other advantages are the security and the quality and the professional standards that sit around the use of aviation because of the high danger and the high utilisation of fuel and dangerous goods. So special conditions there in terms of compliance, regulatory, so those sorts of applications are very special in air freight. Not that sea freight and road and rail transport are not important, but in terms of that quality and security aspects, important. Well, digitisation is existential right across the entire environment of freight, logistics and supply chain. Of course, with the huge impact of e-commerce, more people at home over COVID, we've seen an explosion and escalation. So collaboration is important. Digitisation has meant a whole new ethos right across the industry in the last 5 to 10 years. It's been exacerbated and accelerated over the last 2 years in particular. So digitisation is enabling the rapid movement, the compliance, the security and visibility across the many 20 or 30 different aspects of the supply chain that impact on a freight movement by air can only be handled these days in a timely manner, an efficient manner and an economic manner by digitisation. If we look back over the last decade or so, a lot of the players in the supply chain, all the way through from the beneficial cargo owners, the first mile, through to the manufacturing and distribution and the supply chain hubs, and then out into wholesale and retail, and then of course now with e-commerce being existential right across all of that whole supply chain, is that we're seeing that a lot of the freight providers, a lot of the logistics organisations, especially the tier ones, are going, we used to operate alone and then we went into collaboration with some companies, but increasingly a number of the bigger players are saying, we want to provide an end-to-end service right throughout the supply chain, focus on the customer, focus on the product that they're after, as opposed to whether it's travelling by truck or in a container or in an aircraft or in a rail container, or on a motorbike down to my home with my mobile phone. So increasingly we're seeing this major trend towards a mega shift, towards consolidation, multiple resources, end-to-end supply chain to make sure that the customer journey is economic, because all those factors can be brought into play. They can be controlled by one source, by one player. The security and all the customs issues through digitisation and elimination of paperwork can take place on a platform which is synthesised, and we can have an integrated delivery all the way through on the back end of the supply chain down to the last mile as well. So it's a big move, it takes big investment. Not everybody can afford to do it. Not everybody is doing it, to be fair, and a lot of organisations are staying as part players in the supply chain, collaborating with a lot of the dozen or so top tier ones in the world. But with all that, what we're seeing is a lot of not only organic growth right throughout the supply chain, which is causing a talent shortage, which I'm dealing with, but also what we're seeing is this massive move towards the capability of being able to deliver a parcel or a consignment within a specified time, within the economic time frame, economic framework, and also in a security situation within one complete supply web, if you like. I think supply chain is sometimes a bit linear, and more now we're talking about the supply web.